أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله الذي لا يبلغ مدحته القائلون ولا يوصينا معه العادون ولا يودي حقه المجتهدون الذي لا يدركه بهد الهمم ولا يناله غوث الفتن الذي ليس لصفته حد محدود ولا نعت موجود ولا وقت محدود ولا أجل ممدود فطرها الخلائق بقدرته ونشر الرياح برحمته ووتد بالسخر ما يدعى معرض ثم الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وحبيبنا وحبيب رب العالمين أبي القاسم محمد اللهم صل على محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين واللعن على أدائهم أجمعين من أول يوم ظلمهم إلى قيام يوم الدين أما بعد فقال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه المبين وقوله الحق بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إنا أرسلنا نوحا إلى قومه أن أنذر قومك من قبل أن يأتيهم عذابا عليما صدق الله العلي العظيم. Before we get started, please, brothers and sisters, anyone that is listening to this lecture, please recite Surah Fatiha for the marhumin of Abid Zaidi, for the marhumin of Azra Zaidi, for the marhumin of Nasir Shah, for the marhumin of Sikandar Shah, and for the marhumin of Asad Zaidi. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Bismillah. Dear brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We spoke about the life of Hazrat Nuh alayhi salam to an extent yesterday, and we had said that today we would investigate the major event that had happened in his lifetime, which was the flood or the deluge. To begin with, what was the reason for that flood? We said that there's some questions that people ask about the flood. How is it possible that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you claim that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is all merciful, but at the same time He causes a flood that wipes out every living being in that area, or in the time of Hazrat Nuh. In that time there must have been innocent people, like children who, according to Islam itself, children, they're innocent. When you're born to a certain age, you're innocent, meaning whatever you do, it's not considered a sin upon you. So they have a question that if it is true that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is all merciful, then how do you explain the flood in which there were innocent children that were also killed? Or how do you explain that, okay, in that society there must have been people that whose faculties weren't completely there, whose thinking process wasn't completely there, they were a bit more retarded than the average person. If these types of people also existed, how do you explain Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala being all just or all merciful when these types of people also were included in that flood? And tonight, inshallah, what we want to do is look at the event or that flood, look at why it had occurred, and look at the dua or look at the supplication that Hazrat Nuh alayhi salam did for his son. And we want to analyze these events and then tonight conclude the story of Hazrat Nuh alayhi salam. But the narration say that the people in his time period, they had transgressed all moral bounds. Disbelief, wickedness, and evil had made deep inroads in their social lives, and a purge had to be made, so the great flood put an end to their civilization. Before the final punishment, before the flood, Prophet Nuh alayhi salam warned them against the consequences of their ungodliness. When Hazrat Nuh alayhi salam tried to put fear of torment of a dreadful day in the hearts of the people, what did the people do? They laughed at him. You can read the story of Hazrat Nuh in at the very least 5 chapters of the Quran, where there's verses of the Quran in at the very least 5 chapters where the story of Hazrat Nuh alayhi salam is given. But the story, and you have the chapter of Nuh in the Quran itself. The chapter of Nuh which tells you some of the events that happened in the life of Nuh. But when you put together the chapter of Nuh and all the other chapters that talk about Hazrat Nuh alayhi salam, you get a picture about what had happened during the lifetime of Hazrat Nuh alayhi salam. But when Hazrat Nuh alayhi salam, when Prophet Nuh alayhi salam, he would warn the people, he would invite them back to worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what would they do? They would just laugh at him. Had these people taken advantage of the respite given to them and repented and reformed themselves, what did we say yesterday? We said that in the time of Nuh alayhi salam, 3 times Hazrat Nuh alayhi salam, he wanted to curse. But what happened? The angels came down and they said, Ya Nuh, please do not curse them yet. 300 years. Then he said, okay, I won't curse them now. I'll give them respite for 300 more years. He gave them respite for 300 more years, and nothing changed. When he wanted to curse, the angels came down again, and they said the same thing. So then he said, okay, I'll give them respite for 300 more years. In a total, 900 years. 900 years he gave them respite. Had they taken advantage of the respite given to them and repented and reformed themselves, they would still have obtained mercy. Nabiullah Nuh alayhi salam, he invited them for monotheism, or he invited them to monotheism and true belief for about 800 years before the declaration of prophethood. And we had said yesterday that Nabiullah Nuh alayhi salam, he was the longest living prophet who lived to be 2,500 years old. The first 800 years he lived before declaring prophethood. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says in the Quran, in Surah Al-Ankabut, verse number 14, وَلَقَدْ أَرْسَلْنَا نُوحًا إِلَىٰ قَوْمِهِ فَلَبِثَ فِيهِمْ أَلْفَ سَنَةٍ إِلَّا 50 عَامًا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says that, and verily we sent Nuh to his folk, and he continued with them for 1,000 years except for 50, meaning he was with them for 950 years. Does this mean that, Sayyid, you have your date wrong, he didn't live 2,500 years? No. He was with that group for 950 years. That group, they got killed after the deluge. That group, they got killed after the flood. Hazrat Nuh alayhi salam, he was still living after this group. And this verse of the Quran, it is only and only talking about the 950 years that Nabiullah Nuh alayhi salam was appointed as prophet, or he was told to declare his prophethood and guide the people under the banner of prophethood. Before, the 800 years before, he wasn't declared, or he wasn't told to declare his prophethood. He was doing it without that declaration. So then what does the Quran say? Then the next 950 years, he not only invited them, but also warned them about the flood. The men, women, and children, they used to throw stones at Nabiullah Nuh alayhi salam. And whenever he was buried under the heap of stones, wounded and helpless, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he would send Jibreel to save him and to nurse him back to health. When convincing arguments and warnings are given, those whose intellect is alive to reason and whose conscience is not entirely corrupted beyond recovery, receive guidance, repent, amend their lives, and turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But on the other hand, there are those who stubbornly reject guidance and sink deep into the abyss of evil, disconnecting themselves with all of those links to the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Surah Al-Baqarah, verse number 10, what does it say? في قلوبهم مرض فزادهم الله مرضا ولهم عذاب عليم بما كانوا يكذبون. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says about these types of people who become so arrogant or who become so stubborn that when the truth is right in front of them, because of their arrogance or because of their stubbornness, they don't want to accept it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said about these people, there is a disease in their hearts. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala adds to that disease, and they shall have a painful punishment because of the lies that they used to speak. Imam Baqir, yesterday we had said that the first prophet to bring a sharia, to bring a code of conduct, was Hazrat Nuh alayhi salam. And Imam Muhammad Baqir, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad, He says that the Sharia of Hazrat Nuh was that they should worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with oneness, just worship only and only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and have sincerity and not associate others. And this is the nature upon which the people have been created. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He took a covenant with Nuh and to all the prophets that they would worship Allah and will not associate anything with Him, and commanded for the prayers and the enjoining of the good. Amr bil Maruf, Salat was commanded, Amr bil Maruf was commanded, Nahyan and Munkar was commanded, and the permissible and the prohibitions, what was permissible, it was told to them, what was prohibited, it was told to them. And that Sharia did not necessitate upon them the rules of hudud, nor about the necessities of inheritance. In the Sharia of Hazrat Nuh alayhi salam, according to Imam Muhammad Baqir alayhi salam, there was no rules about inheritance. There was no rules, there were no hudud, meaning what were the punishment for some of the crimes that were committed. There were no hudud in that sense. So what were they doing when the Sharia called for worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Instead of worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they were worshipping false gods. And to this day, you can see some groups still worship them. There were 5 main false gods, or 5 main idols that they used to worship. The first was Wad. This was the shape of a man and it represented manly power. The second was Suwa, and this was the shape of a woman and it represented beauty. The third idol that they worshipped, it was Yaghuth, and it was the shape of a lion or a bull and it represented brute strength. The fourth was Ya'uq, and it was the shape of a horse and it represented swiftness. And the final idol that they worshipped was Yasr, or it was Nasr, and it was in the shape of an eagle or a falcon, and it represented insight. Some of these creatures that they worshipped in the time of Hazrat Nuh alayhi salam are still worshipped by certain native tribes in North and South America. If you look at totem poles of some of these native tribes, you will see the image of some of these creatures. For example, you'll still see the falcon, you'll see a bear, you'll see a bull, you'll see a lion, you'll see pictures or just images of these creatures. These creatures, they were worshipped in the time of Hazrat Nuh alayhi salam. It's stated that after the flood, these gods, they were forgotten, but Shaitan lanatullah alayhi reintroduced them again to the people, and it carried on afterwards. But when every effort of Prophet Nuh alayhi salam and every promise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bestow blessings on them failed to bring them to the right path, that's when the flood came. It wasn't as if Hazrat Nuh alayhi salam, he called them one time, when they didn't listen, the flood came. He called them 2 times when they no. 800 years first, and then 950 years afterwards. Over 1500 years, Prophet Nuh alayhi salam, he was inviting them. For 1500 years, when they didn't listen, after 1500 years, 1600 years, that's when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent that flood. But when it comes to this, Imam Riza alayhi salam, one of the companions of Imam Riza alayhi salam, asked him, what was the reason for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to drown all of the people during the era of Hazrat Nuh? And among them were children and ones who had no sins upon them. This is the question that a lot of people have. Well, there were children in the time of Hazrat Nuh. There were children amongst his people. Or there were people that were sinless, meaning that they didn't have the faculties to differentiate between right and wrong. And because they didn't have those faculties in Islam, even today, if someone doesn't have the faculty to differentiate between right and wrong, there's no sin upon them. So they argue that at that time there were people like that. At that time there were children. And we had already answered this a little bit yesterday. And what does the Imam reply? Imam, he says, look, there were no children among them, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He had sterilized the backbones of the people of Nuh and the wombs of their women for 40 years. So for 40 years the women were barren. For 40 years there were no births that had occurred in the time period of Hazrat Nuh. In that 40-year time frame when the flood occurred or before the flood, there were no children. And he goes on to say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had cut off the offspring. They drowned and there were no children among them. Allah did not destroy by His punishment the one who did not have a sin upon him. And as for the remainder of them that you say, from the people of Nuh, He drowned them due to their denying the Prophet of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, meaning they were denying Hazrat Nuh alayhi salam. And the rest of them, they drowned due to their being pleased with the opposing of Hazrat Nuh alayhi salam. Those people that denied Hazrat Nuh alayhi salam, there were other people who didn't do anything. Meaning what? When these people that were denying Hazrat Nuh alayhi salam, when they would pelt rocks at Hazrat Nuh and leave him unconscious, what would these people do? They wouldn't care. They wouldn't even say, you know what, that's wrong, you shouldn't do this. They just live on with their life. The Imam, what does he say? وَمَنْ غَابَ عَنْ أَمْرٍ فَرَزِيَ بِهِ كَانَ كَمَنْ شَاهِدَهُ وَأَتَاهُ. The Imam, he says, and one who was absent from a matter and was happy with it is like the one who was present and then participated in it. Meaning what? Meaning that if I hear about a sin that was committed, or I hear about an injustice that happened and I'm happy about it, or I stay quiet about it and not speak out against it, it's the same as me participating in that. The ones that were drowned either directly participated in the injustice or indirectly participated in it by not speaking out against it. And today too, what happens when there's an injustice that happens in the world? We don't speak out against it. If you don't, the Imam, the Holy Prophet and the Masumeen, they say if you don't speak out against it, then it's as if you have participated in it. Well, what if you can't speak out against it? What if you can't speak out against it? If you look at just Islamic history, today there's some people that don't, or that choose not to speak out against some of the incidents that happened 1400 years ago. These people, if they can't speak out against it and they don't speak out against it, or they have the opportunity to speak out against it and they don't speak out against it, it's as if they were involved in that atrocity 1400 years ago. What am I talking about? I'm talking about what happened to Lady Zahra sallallahu alaiha. What am I talking about? I'm talking about what happened to Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam. What am I talking about? I'm talking about what happened to Imam Hassan alayhi salam. What happened to Imam Hussein alayhi salam. By not all of this, what happened to Imam Hussein? Where's the beginning of this? The beginning of this is what happened to Lady Zahra sallallahu alaiha. If you have the ability to speak out against it, then it's your duty to speak out against it. What if you don't? What if you can't? What if you can't? The Masumeen, they tell us that too. If you can't speak out against it because of tyranny, then at the very least, you should condemn it with your thought. If you can't condemn it with your actions, then condemn it with your words. If you can't condemn it with your words, then you condemn it with your thoughts. You do it to the point that you can do it without having put your life in danger. If there's a group of people in some part of the world where they can do it with their words, then they should do it with their words. Why? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given them that opportunity to do it with their words. But when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered Prophet Nuh alayhi salam to build the ark, Hazrat Nuh alayhi salam, from this you'll understand how much their disbelief was, or how low they had gone in terms of disbelief. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He ordered Prophet Nuh alayhi salam to build the ark, Hazrat Nuh, he asked, who will assist me in building the ship? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed to him to announce amongst the people that whoever would help him in making the ship and scrape a log, the shavings will turn into gold and silver. When Nuh alayhi salam, he announced this, the people, they came along to help him in building the ship. But at the same time, they mocked him, saying that he was building a ship in the middle of the desert. The Ark of Nuh, it was built in Kufa, and at that time, present day Kufa too, at that time Kufa was a complete desert and just There were just some cities around it. For example, Hazrat Nuh alayhi salam and his people. But at that time it was complete desert. But alhamdulillah, today it's just partial desert, I guess. But look at these people. Look at how blind they are to the faith. Look how blind they became to faith. The shavings from the trees are turning into gold and silver, yet they still don't believe this man to be a prophet. They're pocketing all the gold and silver, yet they're still laughing at Prophet Nuh alayhi salam. Miracles are happening right in front of their eyes, yet they don't want to believe. What good was all of that gold? What good was all of that silver? What does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say? فِي قُلُوبِهِمْ مَرَضٌ فَزَادَهُمُ اللَّهُ مَرَضًا وَلَهُمْ عَذَابٌ عَلِيمٌ بِمَا كَانُوا يَكْذِبُونَ. There's a disease in their hearts. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala increases that disease. And they shall have a painful punishment because they used to lie. Or because they lied. This disease of disbelief. Look at how it had completely overtaken their whole existence. They're picking up gold and silver, or they're picking up scrapings from the logs, shavings from the logs which turned into gold and silver. Yet they still don't believe this man to be a prophet. They still laugh at him. And when the ark was finally finished and the flood, it started, the narrations, they state that the flood lasted for 7 days, and the waters came up from the ground and came down from the skies for 1 week continuously. And it was in this time, Prophet Nuh alayhi salam, he sees his son Canaan, and what happens? Quran, Surah Al-Hud, verse number 42 and 43. What did they say? So the ark floated with them on the waves, towering like mountains. And Nuh called out to his son, who had separated himself from the rest of the people. And what did Hazrat Nuh say? He says, "O my son, come back with me, or embark with us, and be not with the unbelievers." And what does his son reply in verse number 43 of Surah Al-Hud? قَالَ سَاوِي إِلَى جَبَلٍ يَعْصِمُنِي مِنَ الْمَاءِ. The son of Hazrat Nuh, he says, I will take refuge on some mountain and it will save me from the water. It will save me from the water. A prophet and his son. Hazrat Nuh alayhi salam is telling his son to come. And Prophet Nuh alayhi salam, he sees his son drowning. And what does he say? He says, Rabbi inna ibni min ahli wa inna wa'daka al-haqqu wa anta ahkamul hakimin. Hazrat Nuh alayhi salam, he says, my Lord, surely my son is of my family. Ahli, the word ahli is used. And your promise is surely true, and you are the most just of the judges. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what does he reply? He says, قَالَ يَا نُوهُ إِنَّهُ لَيْسَ مِنْ أَهْلِكَ. Ya Nuh, he is not of your family, for his conduct is unrighteous. Nuh made this supplication to make it clear forever that any relationship to the prophets without spiritual excellence does not justify the use of the term Ahlul Bayt. Today, إِنَّمَا يُرِيدُ اللَّهُ لِيُذْهِبَ عَنْكُمُ الرِّجْسَ أَهْلَ الْبَيْتِ وَيُطَهِّرَكُمْ تَطْهِيرًا. When we get to this verse, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad, there's so many debates that occur. There are debates that occur. Oh, the wives of the Prophet are in this. The wives of the Prophet are in this. Although Canaan was his son, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says to Nuh, Ya Nuh, verily he is not of your family. He is not of your ahl. Why? Because he was an infidel. And he did not have the same qualities as his father. In Islam, birth or ancestry has no value at all. Salman, who was an outsider, Salman Farsi was an outsider, was accepted as one among the Ahlul Bayt by the Holy Prophet. Why? Based on his faith and piety. No other companion had achieved such a singular position except for Salman. Imam Raza alayhi salam, there's a narration from Imam Raza alayhi salam, he says, like the accursed son of Nuh, whoever is of us but does not obey Allah's command, meaning whoever is from our progeny but does not obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's commands and follow the sunnah of the Holy Prophet, ceases to be of us. And those who call themselves our followers, those who call themselves our Shias, but do not carry out the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His Prophet, are not our Shias at all. They're not our Shia. So what does this mean? Imam Riza alayhi salam says all the Sadat, they go back to one of the Imams. From the Imams, they go back to the Holy Prophet. Imam Riza alayhi salam, he says that anyone who's from us, from our progeny, but does not follow the guidelines of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, does not follow the sunnah of the Holy Prophet, is not from one of us. Any Shia who claims to be our Shia, or anyone who claims to be our Shia and does not follow these same guidelines, is not our Shia. But Imam Jafar Sadiq alayhi salam, it's reported that he said that Najaf was at that time, in the time of Hazrat Nuh alayhi salam, Najaf, it was the tallest of all the mountains. And the son of Nuh, he had referred to it when he said that he would take refuge upon it from the deluge. When the son of Hazrat Nuh alayhi salam, he said that when his father called him and he told him to come on the ark to save himself from the flood, the son of Nuh, what does he say? Canaan. He says that I'll take refuge on that mountain. Imam Jafar Sadiq alayhi salam, he says that the mountain he was referring to, that mountain's name was Najaf. And what happened to that mountain? At that very moment, Imam, he goes on, he says that at that very moment, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He revealed to that mountain that some evil people are about to take refuge upon it. And that mountain, the narration says that it became frightened that it crashed and pulverized into soft sand. And in its place, a river, it came into existence, and this river was called Nai. Later, that river dried up and got the name Naijaf. It was a mountain first. It got pulverized. When it got pulverized, a river came in its place, and once that river dried up, or that river was called Nay, and once that river dried up, the name Naijaf was there. But due to frequent usage, Naijaf changed into Najaf. Jaffa, it means to dry in Arabic. When that river dried up, it had the name Najaf, and because of usage over time, Najaf turned into Najaf. But it related from reliable sources that when Nuh alayhi salam, he descended from the ship after the flood, 7 days, the flood was there for 7 continuous days, and the narration state that during the flood, the Ark of Nuh, it was going around the Kaaba itself too, and the Kaaba was not touched during the flood of Nuh. And as soon as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had told Nuh, when he got into the ship and the flood started and the boat started moving, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told him, as soon as you get onto this boat, there are some narrations that say that when you get onto this boat and you feel that you need to call out for help, then use these 5 names and call out for help. And those 5 names that were given were whom? No other than Muhammad, Ali, Fatima, Hassan, and Hussein. Hazrat Nuh alayhi salam, he used these names to be safe on that ship. He used these names to keep the ship safe from the wrath of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is the reason the Holy Prophet had said, My Ahlul Bayt are like the Ark of Nuh. Anyone who boards that ark is safe, and anyone who rejects that ark is condemned. It was that ark that saved whatever humanity, whatever animals that were there, the creatures that were there, it was that ark that saved. The same way that ark saves, the Holy Prophet is saying that same way, my Ahlul Bayt save. Save from what? Ahlul Bayt, they save from distress. So when we say Ya Ali Madad, the Holy Prophet, by this narration is accepted by Shias and Sunnis. It's not just a Shia narration. But when we say Ya Ali Madad, when we say Ya Hussein Madad, when we say Ya Hassan Madad, Ya Zahra Madad, you can refer back to this narration and analyze this narration. What was the job of the Ark of Noah? To save the people from distress, to save the creatures from distress. That was the job. In time of distress, what did Hazrat Nuh alayhi salam himself say? He asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help through these 5 personalities. But it's stated in narrations that after the flood had subsided, or when Hazrat Nuh alayhi salam, he descended from the ship, Shaitan la'natullah alayhi, he came up to him and he said that, Ya Nuh, you have done the greatest favor for me. You cursed the people and they all perished, thus you saved me the trouble of deviating them from the right path. In appreciation, look at the words of Shaitan la'natullah alayhi. He says, in appreciation of your favor, I inform you of 2 attributes. One is that you should never be jealous of anyone, because whatever harm has come to me is due to jealousy. Secondly, never be greedy, because whatever harm came to Adam was due to greed. And another tradition by Imam Jafar Sadiq alayhi salam is stated that when Hazrat Nuh alayhi salam, he cursed his people and they were destroyed, Shaitan came to him and he said, Ya Nuh, you have done me a favor and I want to repay it. Hazrat Nuh alayhi salam, he looks at Shaitan, he says, a favor? What favor did I do? What was it? What favor did I do to you? And Shaitan, he said that you have done me a favor by cursing your people. Now there's no one left for me to deviate from the right path. I can rest in ease until the next century. I can rest in ease now. So when Shaitan, he says this, Nuh, he asks him in what way Shaitan, he wished to repay favor. And Shaitan says that, remember, there are 3 situations when I find it very easy to gain control over a person. 1, when that person is angry. 2nd, when there is arbitration between 2 parties. And 3rd, when a servant is alone with a non-mahram. In these three scenarios, Shaitan, he says that in these 3 scenarios, if a person is engrossed in one of these 3 scenarios, it is easy for me, or it's easier for me to make them deviate from the right path. And you all can think of scenarios that you've been in. I'm sure everyone has been in one of these 3 scenarios. Anger. Anger is the most common. Everyone needs to try to control their anger, but when it comes to anger, Shaitan, he says that when someone is in a state of anger, it's easy for me to make them deviate from the right path. Why? Because in a state of anger, you lose your faculties. You're not yourself. You're not yourself. Meaning that what you would do in a normal situation, you want to do that in a state of anger. And even scientists today, when they look at the chemicals that are being released when you're angry, and they compare them to just a normal body, they say, no, when you're angry, yes, your mind is, the way you think has changed, because there are different chemicals that are being released, and the way those chemicals are interacting, they affect the decisions that you make. So Shaitan, he says, one of those times is when a person's angry. And when a person's angry, everything comes out. All of the cursing comes out. Everything that has happened. It can get to a point where, you know what? You're angry at one of your friends, you're angry at a sibling. It gets to a point where you say something and you can never take it back. Whatever friendship that was there, because of what you said, it's lost. It's gone. You might be able to make up, but at the same time, that friend will never look at you the same way again. Why? Because in a state of anger, Shaitan overtook you. And there are other narrations from Imam Jafar Sadiq alayhi salam. They say that after embarking from the ship, Hazrat Nuh, he lived for 500 years. And when he lived his destined age, Jibreel alayhi salam, he came to him and he said to Nuh, Ya Nuh, your prophethood has come to an end now. So pass on the greatest name, the Isma Azam of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Pass on the heritage of knowledge and the relics of prophethood to your son Sam. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says that He would never keep the earth devoid of His representatives. There will always be a learned one on it because of whom the slaves would regard me worthy of worship. So that after passing away of one prophet to the appointment of another prophet, he may be the source of their salvation. He may be the source of their salvation. There is always a successor. Until the next prophet comes, there's always a successor. So when there's always a successor, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says there's always a successor. So tell me, who were the successors from the time of Hazrat Isa alayhi salam to the Holy Prophet? Who were these successors? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, until the next prophet comes, successors from the previous prophet, they will continue. And this Ism Azam and the relics of the prophets would be passed on to these successors. And eventually it'll get to the prophet. So from the time of Hazrat Isa alayhi salam to the time of the Holy Prophet, who were these successors? Who were these people that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala kept alive monotheism through? Who are these successors that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that they need to exist on earth? And He goes on to say, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He goes on to say, I will never leave the world without a proof who will call people towards me and who would know my commands. Ya Allah, if that's the case, then I ask the Muslims, who were those people that were calling, or who were those proofs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that were calling people towards monotheism after Nabiullah Isa to the time of the Holy Prophet? Who were those people? This is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, this is my order, and I have destined this for every group of people, that I will establish a guide through whom I will guide the obedient people, and thereby my argument would be exhausted on the wretched people. Accordingly, Hazrat Nuh alayhi salam, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had ordered him to, he handed over the greatest name and the prophetic relics to his son Sam. So when we get to the life of Hazrat Nuh, brothers and sisters, to summarize everything, Hazrat Nuh alayhi salam, the first Ulul Azm prophet, Hazrat Nuh alayhi salam was the longest living prophet, and because he was the longest living prophet, he was given the title of Shaykhul Anbiya, or the elder of the Anbiya. Hazrat Nuh alayhi salam, the first punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that came on people was in the time of Hazrat Nuh alayhi salam. And it's stated in some narrations that when Hazrat Nuh alayhi salam's soul was to be taken, the angel of death, he comes to Hazrat Nuh and he tells him, Ya Nuh, your time is over. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is destined for you to come back up now. Hazrat Nuh, he tells the angel of death, can you just give me enough time to go into the shade? And the angel of death, he says, yes, no problem. And when he goes into the shade, someone who lived 2,500 years, when he goes into the shade and his soul was about to be taken out, what does he say? He says the lifetime of this world was how long it took for me to come from the sun into the shade. Someone who lived 2,500 years. Meaning what? Meaning for us who live a maximum of 70 years, 80 years, 90 years, most of us, the one or two people that might live to be 120, 125, most of us, maximum 85 years, 90 years to say. How much good have we done in those 90 years? Compare it with how much bad we have done. no doubt we can say that, you know what, we've done more bad than we've done good. But brothers and sisters, Arhamur Rahimin, He is always waiting. He is always looking. He is always wanting to give you an excuse to repent. Always. He gives you time. He gives you time for worship. Just look, today, these days, everyone is locked up. How many of us are taking advantage of this and supplicating to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? How many of us are taking advantage of this and reading the Quran? How many of us are taking advantage of this and looking at the religious laws? Even in this time period, we can take advantage of this and make our afterlife better. Through ibadat that we can do. The month of Ramadan, you open up the Mafati, there's so much ibadat that you can do. There's so much. But how many of us are looking at this scenario that we've been given today and taking advantage of it from this point of view? Not many of us. We're just at home, sitting around, watching TV, on the computer maybe. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us opportunity to worship Him, are we taking advantage of that opportunity? When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us opportunity to ask for forgiveness, maybe it might be possible that you forget about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when you're at work. You're outside in the world, you forget. Why? Because there's so much to do. Now what is there to do? Everyone's at home. What is there to do? Are we taking advantage of this and asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for forgiveness? Or are we just moving on with our lives, pretending that we've done nothing wrong and we're completely sinless? I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive all of our sins, to forgive the sins of all the mu'mineen, mu'minat. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to keep the Imam of our time safe, make his reappearance as soon as possible. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us to sacrifice our life for him and his cause when he reappears. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us the opportunity to thank him for the blessings that he has given us in these days, or in our life, but in these days in the sense that we're at home and he gives us the opportunity to thank him. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that he gives us the opportunity to seek forgiveness for the sins that we have committed throughout our life. And I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to keep all of the mu'mineen, to have them attached to those people, those personalities that the Holy Prophet had said are like the Ark of Noah. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Brothers and sisters, please recite another Surah Fatiha for the marhumeen of Asad Zaidi, for the marhumeen of Azra Zaidi, for the marhumeen of Sikandar Shah, for the marhumeen of Nashir Shah, and for the marhumeen of Abid Zaidi. Please recite a Surah Fatiha for all of their marhumeen. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahmanir Rahim. Maliki Yawmiddin. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Ihdinas siratal mustaqim. Siratal ladzina an'amta alaihim ghayril maghdubi alaihim waladdallin. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Qul huwallahu ahad. Allahu samad. Lam yalid wa lam yulad. Bismillah. And if anyone else would like to sponsor these lectures, please, by all means, get in contact with Brother Asad Zaidi directly and ask him what needs to be done for you to sponsor these lectures, because like I've been saying for these last couple of days, and I will continue to repeat to remind everyone that the sawab of these lectures, every word, the sawab of every word, the sawab of every ayah that is recited, the sawab of every narration of the Holy Prophet or the Holy Masu'een that are recited, the sawab, it goes to your marhumeen. So if you want your marhumeen to receive sawab of these lectures, please get in contact with Brother Asazaidi and ask him what can be done to have these lectures sponsored. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, and inshallah, brothers and sisters, I will see you all again tomorrow.